we're going to analyze how the author's style and content contribute to the persuasiveness of her text. In order to do that, we're going to look at A Quilt of a Country by Anna Quindlen. If you notice at the top, it says that this article was first published in Newsweek on September 26th of 2011. And understanding the context to any text is really important. So if you think about it, you're going to realize that this is only a couple weeks after the September 11th terrorist attacks. So Anna Quindlen is writing this in response to those events. Keep that in mind as you read. The other thing I want us to do, and this is what's going to fulfill our goal today, is I want us to look for the thesis statement. Remember that the thesis statement is what the author wants to get across in their entire article. I also want us to highlight in one color uses of effective language. So language that has an emotional appeal or a logical appeal or an appeal to ethics or authority are good examples of effective uses of language. And I'll give you examples in the text too. I also want you to highlight in a different color source information. And source information is information that the author pulls from an outside person, study, or text. So think about quotes or paraphrases. Okay, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started reading paragraph 1. So follow along with me as I read. America is an improbable idea, a mongrel nation built on ever-changing disparate parts. It is held together by a notion, the notion that all men are created equal. Though everyone knows that most men consider themselves better than someone. Of all the nations in the world, the United States was built in nobody's image, the historian Daniel Borston wrote. That's because it was built on bits and pieces that seemed discordant, like the crazy quilts that have been one of its great folk art forms, velvet and calico, and checks and brocades, out of many, one, that is the ideal. You probably noticed that Miss Quindlen put her thesis statement in these first two sentences. America is an improbable idea, a mongrel nation built on ever-changing disparate parts. It is held together by a notion, the notion that all men are created equal, though everyone knows that most men consider themselves better than someone. So go ahead and underline this. That's our thesis statement. She's arguing here that America is an improbable idea and that it's built on these different parts that's held together by a particular notion, and she defines that. So if we're also looking at the first paragraph, we're going to read, of all the nations in the world, the United States was built on nobody's image. And if you pay attention, that is in quotation marks. She's quoting. If you read, you also might have noticed that there's quotation marks here. So these quotation marks tell us that this isn't her original idea. It's the historian Daniel Borston. So we're going to highlight this in blue for source information. If you're perceptive, you might say, well, Mr. Brown, that is source information, but isn't it also effective language because they're appealing to authority? And you'd be right in saying that. And you could also highlight it orange, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight it blue because there's more effective language than there is source information. Okay, that's because it was built on bits and pieces that seem discordant. Like the crazy quilts that have been one of its great folk art forms, velvet and calico, checks and brocades. Out of many one, that is the ideal. We see that she uses this simile, like the crazy quilts that have been one of its great folk art forms. So I think that using this poignant language by using a simile is pretty effective language. She's actually using an emotional appeal. When I think of handmade quilts, personally, I think of my grandmother who actually handmade the quilt that I currently have on my bed. So it creates a positive tone. It's a positive tone that she's applying to the notion of the American dream. She's wanting us to think that the notion that America is built of many different parts is a good thing. It's a positive thing. So it's effective language. Highlight that in orange.